Welcome you in here to Christian Brothers Court on the campus of Sacred Heart Cathedral. I'm Kevin Buckley, class of 2013, with Mario Alioto, class of 1978. Mario, thanks for coming by campus and joining us.
Oh, great, thank you. It was nice to come back today. It's been a while since I've been back on campus, and it's always nice to come back to where you went to school. It's already brought back a ton of memories as I walked in this morning, so appreciate being here.
And why don't you let us know what's your title with the San Francisco Giants right now?
I'm the Executive Vice President of Business Operations, so I oversee a lot of our revenue areas, our marketing, our advertising, our ticketing, a lot of our broadcasting areas. So pretty much oversee the business side of running the operation.
Excellent. So you, of course, the name Alioto, one a lot of San Franciscans are probably very familiar with. A lot of people involved with Sacred Heart Cathedral familiar with the name. What's your connection? Where'd you grow up in the city, and then how'd you get involved with the SHC community?
Well, it's an interesting question because to this day I still get asked quite often, especially even when I travel, when we were traveling.
Right.
They always say, "Are you one of the Aliotos?" And I got that all the time, and I always take pride in saying, "Yeah, we're all related." The town of Sicily, where the Aliotos are from, is a very small town. But I grew up in the south part of the city, off of Silver Avenue in the Portola district. I went to St. Elizabeth's school in that parish, and so I grew up, very close to Candlestick Park in that area, which was one of the reasons why I think I was able to work for the Giants as a kid. But the Alioto name still gets me good seats and a good table at a restaurant.
Yeah.
But it is a well-known name, and I've gotten to know a lot of the Aliotos over the years. But I can't say, we're all related, but not really that as close as one might think.
Right. And so how did you become involved with the San Francisco Giants?
Well, my dad actually worked for a linen company, and his route, one of his stops was the Giants clubhouse, pick up towels, or in the restaurant, the stadium club. But that was one of his stops, and got to know Mike Murphy, who was the equipment manager for so many years, and he's still with the team today. Yeah. And my brother Carl, who was 3 years ahead of me here at Sacred Heart, he played baseball. He was a pretty good baseball player at the time. Probably thinks he still is, but he probably is. But he was able to get a job as a bat boy in the visiting clubhouse at Candlestick Park in 1972. So he did that for a year and a half or so. But he really wanted to play baseball, and he had to be at practices and games and everything. So and I used to hang around all the time when my dad used to go pick him up after those games. So Mike Murphy asked me, and it was like August of '73 that I was 12 years old, and I started as a bat boy in the visiting clubhouse, and it was so cool. I have great stories from that time, but thinking about who those players were that went through that clubhouse, from Hank Aaron to Lou Brock to Bob Gibson, Johnny Bench, Pete Rose. Go through the Willie Stargell. If I go through every team, it's amazing the experience I had as a kid. I learned a lot about the game and an appreciation for it. But I was lucky enough to see what the game was like behind the curtain, and that side of things. And I did get booed because I wore the Dodger uniform when the Dodgers came in. But it was all fun. And one thing I'll say about when I was a bat boy, to this day when I go to a sporting event, I don't cheer. I just sit and watch. And I'm certain it's because I spent so many years in that visiting dugout where my favorite team was winning, and I had to train myself just to sit there.
Right.
And to this day, when we won the World Series in 2010, we were in Texas, and we won the World Series. It was wonderful. I stood up and chat, but I wasn't high-fiving everybody. It's a weird feeling that I have, and I think a lot of it is to do because I spent so much time in that dugout with wearing the other team's uniform.
Wow, excellent. And what was your time like here at Sacred Heart Cathedral? You mentioned class of 1978, very different place in the 70s than it is now. What was your experience like as a Fighting Irish student?
I loved my 4 years here. I really, really did. At the time, it was an all-boys school. Cathedral was across the street but I learned so much, and it was a time in that time of your life as a young student, as a young adult, being with all the guys who I'm still close with today. Yeah. Just many of them we still stay in touch. But I have some real fond memories of things I learned here, just experiences, and I really have a real affinity for the Christian Brothers. And I went to St. Mary's College after graduating here. But and some of the brothers, he's no longer a brother, but brother Louis Fabiano, who I think taught me more than probably in my mind, probably more than anyone that I had contact with at school, because I never had him as a teacher, but I was a class vice president in junior year, maybe senior year, I can't remember. But he taught us how you can really do anything. Dream big, and and just go for it. And I remember one time we had but he allowed us to make mistakes. I mean, we had when junior year, when we got our class rings, we had our big ring mass, and we were in charge of putting the whole liturgy together. And I remember somehow we came up with the idea that we're going to go to every councilate and get every flag from every country. And it's like, we're thinking, how the heck are we going to do that? But we somehow mobilized everybody, and we did it. And little things like that, we look back on, it's okay, but when you're that age, it's a big deal to do that and to go out in the city and to make that happen. I do remember one time thinking about, in one of our Christmas masses, we put that liturgy together, and the first reading we did a poem, which was Christmas. It was Christmas Is or something. And we were so proud of it, but the Archbishop was not very happy with us then, and we heard about it. But anyway, I think being at Sacred Heart taught us, to follow your dreams, no matter where you came from in the city, no matter what your background is, you have a chance to succeed. And sometimes, sometimes making mistakes is part of how you learn, and that's how you grow. And so I loved my 4 years here, fighting Irish.
Great stories. And were there any other faculty members or teachers that you particularly got along with?
Mike Otterstead. Yeah. My three of my 4 kids, three of them are boys. They went to De La Salle, so it was interesting to see him. And and he was my JV baseball coach. Right. And just thinking through that. But I have other memories of teachers who unfortunately have passed. But you just think about that, just how much they gave of themselves to teach, just being in that line of profession of teaching at a time when you're that age, you think you have all the answers,
right.
We did all the tricks in class, but there was a real loving feeling in this school, like it kind of it wraps its arms around you when you walk in here.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the feeling that I still have today, just walking in.
You mentioned after Sacred Heart went on to St. Mary's College, so 8 years of the LaSallian education. Then what was life like for you after that, after school and finished?
Well, it's when I graduated in 1978 here, and that was my last year working with the Giants. I left and thought that was it. I was going to figure out what I was going to do the rest of my life. Right. And but I went to St. Mary's College, and I was actually a bank teller one summer for Hibernia Bank, which was another great experience at the time. But I thought I would never. I mean, the way I got back in the Giants was something I never would have thought would happen. But in 1980, Mike Murphy, who I worked for as a kid, as a bat boy, he moved to the home clubhouse, and because Eddie Logan retired, who come here from New York with the Giants, and they moved here in 1958. Murph moved to the home side, and the person who was going to take over the visiting clubhouse was killed in spring training and by a drunk driver. And I saw that in the Chronicle when I was in my dorm room at St. Mary's, and that afternoon I got a call from Murph saying if I wanted to come back. I was 19, and I thought, my God, I mean, people run the visiting clubhouse for the whole careers, and I have a chance to come back and do this. And I thought, well, I'm living at St. Mary's on campus. It's close enough. I'm going back.
Right.
So I came back, and in 1980, 81, and 82, I ran the visiting clubhouse. And then I was hiring the bat boys. It was it's surreal to think about that. I had that opportunity to do that. But I grew a lot in those years to understand this was my responsibility now.
Right.
And so I went back, but I knew all along that, when I was in Sacred Heart, I was in the band for a long time. I had a band through college. There's certain things I knew. I liked putting on events. I liked putting on a show.
Right.
And I knew that even though as much as I loved the clubhouse, I loved being around all the guys, that I wanted to do something more. I wanted to get to the front office. I wanted to be part of the thinking behind putting on these events. So when I graduated from St. Mary's in 82, I left. I actually begged for a job in the front office, and I worked in the front office. Started in 83. But it's interesting. In 1983, I didn't go to one game because I just I missed being down in the clubhouse and in the game, and part of that, I missed it so much. Right. That I just didn't have the heart to go back to a game and sit in the stands. It took me a long time to get through it. But I worked in accounting for the first year. Then I wanted to get into the marketing promotions area. That's where I knew was going to be my sweet spot. And the company was a lot smaller then, but I somehow made it happen. In 1984, we had the All-Star game, and then and then just life just starts. And when I talk to students today, I always tell them, don't plan out too much. Everyone's expected to know what you're going to do forever, and sometimes you just gotta hold on and see where life takes you. Right? Because I never would have dreamed I'd be sitting here today talking to you, and I've been with the Giants for over 40 years, and I'm still doing what I love, right. And it's amazing. You just never know.
So what other positions have you had with the Giants leading up to where you're current?
Yeah, I started in accounting, but I was working for the Giants dugout stores at the time, and we only had 2 stores, but I did the accounting for them. I don't know if it's called accounting, but it was more like inventory control at the time. I did accounts payable for a year. I loved that job because I knew when I did accounts payable, as long as I balanced out every Friday and got the checks out, I got home without not one thing in my mind every weekend. Yeah. But I did that for about 6 months. But in '84. I became the promotions manager, and I was putting the events on, and eventually director of marketing, and that time in marketing in sports back in the '80s really it meant that you figure out what your promotion schedule is, cap days and your back days or whatever those special events are, and you go out and find a sponsor, the Coca-Colas and the companies to offset the expenses, and that's where I learned to sell, and that if you're passionate about what you sell. It somehow comes together. So I had to order the items, make sure I had someone who's willing to offset it, and put this promotion package together, and convince that client or convince that company that I'm solving his or her problems with this marketing program. I learned a lot as director of marketing, but that was really, but the things that we did from cap days to, I guess so many stories of what we did back then, and we were trying to be creative. And eventually trying to sell tickets, trying to get people that want to come to Candlestick Park. Right. Right. And we had one guy, I remember, between games of a doubleheader, I hired a guy named Spanky Spangler from Philadelphia. I think he was from Philadelphia. And all we did was hire him to come in to entertain the crowd between games. And he had his whole shtick was to get in a crane above the lip of the stadium and jump off into a mattress. And paid him, I think it was like $5,000 or something. And flew him out, so between games he gets in this thing. What a showman! He goes up in this cage, the crane extends, and realized that the mattress, when it blows up, was about the size of this gym. It was pretty tough to miss, although it was a windy day. And then he jumps off, and everybody cheered, and that was entertainment. But what it taught me is that it was like going to a high school game when you're cheering in the cheering section with the students. There's a game going on. And how do you build that atmosphere where people want to have fun? And my boss, who I worked over at the time, Pat Gallagher, who I still look at, we still talk, and he's always been my mentor. Is that he really taught me that we're in the fun business, and never to forget that. And that's we're not. They don't pay us to watch. Fans don't pay to come watch us work. They watch the players. It's about the players and what's going on the field. But it's also that whole atmosphere of coming to a baseball game. From the minute you buy a ticket to the minute you drive away, we're in charge of that whole experience, and we can control everything except for how the team plays. And ultimately, that's how I thought about it. Anyway, so I was director of marketing. Then what happened is, over years we went through 4 elections where we lost about building a new ballpark. Yes. And thought for a time that the team was, in 1992, was sold to go to Tampa. I remember I met with Vince Namoli, who bought the team, about potentially moving the floor. He met with a bunch of us, and that didn't work out, obviously. But the team was saved here, and but we knew, being part of the team that somehow figured out a way to build, at the time, Pac Ballpark privately, was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, to figure that out. You talk about what Brother Lewis taught me. I mean, this was the impossible, where everyone said there's no way you guys can pull that off, but somehow we figured it out. And sometimes you got to produce just because of the fear of failure. But we've tried everything, and it worked, and magic happened, and here we are in this beautiful ballpark, 21 years later. Right. So, so I was involved in a lot of that, especially selling the Winter Circle sponsors, those sponsors that came in and helped us build the ballpark, financially. Right. But ultimately, my position grew, and and the company grew. The company got bigger. We structured it differently, and so here's I am today as executive VP of business.
Excellent.
Sorry for the long answer there.
No,
but,
that's great. Yeah. So now, what does your day-to-day job look like now? Working for
it's in non-COVID times when we were going to the ballpark every day. We had someone who oversaw our HR department for many years, and she told me a line that I never forgot. She said, the higher you get in a company, the higher as your responsibilities grow, sometimes the less you think you're doing. And that really stuck with me, because my role now is more, I didn't say visionary, but it's more about encouraging the staff that reports, the departments that report to me, to figure out the strategy to get to what we're laying out as the goal. And but my day-to-day job now is really, the ticket world is a big part of what we do, and we have Russ Stanley, who oversees our ticket operation. He's been doing this for a long time, and we're very close, and we strategize together. But really understanding the difference, how the ticketing world and how the new generation looks at the game differently than when I did when I grew up. So we spent a lot of time on ticket strategy and how we're going to sell tickets. A lot of time on our development of our special events and the types of things we're going to do to attract fans in the ballpark. I think in today's world also is the development of content. We want to create our own content. We have our own SFG Productions staff where we more or less control our own advertising and our marketing right now. So I have quite a number of departments that come under me, but I'm also the kind of person who I like to stay in the background. I like to let those who are in the weeds, if you will, understand their job. My goal is to work with my boss, Larry Barrett, who's our president and CEO, to really understand where the company's going. We have to report. We have a number of owners. We have 32 owners, I believe, or investors in the team. And how do we navigate this company to continue to be profitable, to continue to be a community asset, a place where people want to go and gather and enjoy this whole legacy of being a Giants fan, and really keep this this emotional connection with this organization going. I mean, that's I'm a big believer in building our brand. And somebody once told me, this guy ran an advertising company, is that a brand is not built by what you say about it; it's about how it behaves. And we try to make the right decisions to build what this Giants brand is all about today. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I will say that winning solves a lot of problems. Winning the World Series and that experience was something I'll never forget. But I would say what keeps me up at night right now, though, is understanding the new generation. How do we create new customers? And I would say that I grew up going to before I was a bat boy. My grandfather had season tickets, section 11, row 5, seat 5.
You remember it?
And it was when the seats were wooden, and I used to go every weekend, and it was a big deal. And we'd sit there and watch the game, and we knew the players were, the players were the same players per position almost every game. Now, players are moving from team to team quite often, right. And the younger generation consumes the game through the cell phone, and they're not necessarily, they want the highlights, they want to know what happened. Yep. And I think what we find out today in today's live sports arena is that we're developing more social areas where there's the game is going on, but sometimes the game is just a backdrop to some fans. As for fanatic fans, every batting average, you're keeping score. Now it's the attention span is not as long, and the decision to buy a ticket sometimes is a few hours before the game and not 3 months before the game. Right. So those types of keeping up with how the trends are changing, and the world has changed so much in the last 5 years, that that to me is what not keeps me up at night, but actually it gets me excited, because we've got to figure this out. Because what we did 20 years ago is not necessarily the answer to what we're going to do today, right, or 20 years from now. Yep. And our job is to be caretakers for this franchise as we hand it on to the next generation.
It's certainly a good point. Winning does solve a lot of problems. Yep. You got to be happy with the way the Giants have played this year. They might be the biggest surprise in Major League Baseball.
Well, it's interesting. With the new direction, with our new president of baseball operations, Farhan Zaidi, and Gabe Kapler. And Gabe I just love working with him, because he understands what we do on our side of the business. He's very much involved on the office side of things. Everything just seems to be working well. But it's a different game we're watching today. You know,
Yes.
I mean, when I was a kid, the only time you saw the shift is when Willie McCovey was up or Willie Stargell. That's it. You know, but we are excited, and you know, we have our advertising theme this year is just the word resilient, because as we've all dealt with the COVID situation this past year, we feel that as a team, the way Gabe Kapler has talked about the kind of players that they're looking for, the way they're going to play, the way they're going to, just that whole gritty feel to that. I think it represents our employees going through and working out of our homes and staying focused on our jobs. Our fans who've had to deal with, the 2020 season where we had cardboard cutouts, and it's amazing how fans, they participated and they were part of that. And I think more importantly, just the community, the Bay Area, and the whole country, frankly, but even the community, we've been through a lot. And, whether it's the earthquake in '89 or whether it's 9/11, things that have happened, we always seem to bounce back. And we thought, and we continue to think, that the word resilient really represents a lot of aspects as to the Giants organization and the Bay Area community in San Francisco in particular. So we're off to a great start, and it's a long season. A lot can happen. But, in 2010 when we won the World Series, no one expected anything, and we were 8 games out in August.
Right.
So, and in 1997 we had an advertising theme that was anything can happen. And it's still a theme that works today for anything can happen in this business. And you just got to hold on and see what happens.
Can you give us a player or two you think we should be looking out for the rest of the year?
Well, I won't give a particular name, but I will say this, that our team right now is a combination of veterans who are playing really well, and people grew up meeting the last several years, especially through the World Series years, that they remember. There's that connection with Brandon Crawford and Brandon Belt, and obviously Buster Posey is having a great year.
Yep.
But then you bring these new players up that Farhan has found and kind of rejuvenated their careers in a way, and. So I just think there's a combination of veterans and young players that somehow it's all about chemistry. And, what's happening right now, I don't know if it's going to last or not, but we had a big meeting about this yesterday, that, all of a sudden these guys are wearing mustaches. Hey, if maybe we'll all grow a mustache if we keep winning. But, I think on the marketing side of things, the things that I keep my ear open for is, I was talking about our advertising with the word resilient. Oftentimes, the real marketing message for the year is going to come from the clubhouse. It's going to be something that a player says or something that a player is doing. Will it be mustaches? I don't know. Was it, when Hunter Pence, when that whole yes thing a few years ago, that came from him, and that ended up being, the label we put on everything as we got into the race. So it's only May. I don't want to talk about whether we're going to be in a pennant race or not, but I'm just glad we're playing baseball in front of fans this year, because there's something about baseball that maybe because of the time of the year, it starts in the spring. It's with everything we've all been through. It's just nice to know that things are getting back to normal, and there's nothing better than coming out to a baseball game and seeing a ball game being played, smelling the grass, and that whole experience of being at a ballpark to me is a magical feeling. And I'm just glad we're back at it again.
You've seen a lot of Giants history in your time here. Are there any specific moments that really stand out to you as highlights in your long career?
Yeah, boy, you don't get me started, because I can go on. I'll tell you a couple of just quick ones, just for my own personal ones. I think the first one for me was in 1973, when I started. Yeah. It was Willie Mays' last year as a Met. Last year, and the Mets came back. This was a few weeks after I started, but he came back. It was his last time ever, because he already said he's going to retire. The Mets were in town. It was a Sunday afternoon. He never came out for batting practice. And if you remember, Candlestick Park, but visiting team had to walk across the field. So he finally comes out right before the game starts with a few players. The place is going crazy out there. Maybe 25,000 fans back then. But Willie finally comes out, and everybody knows this is the last time I can see him as a baseball player. And I'm sitting there with my uniform on, my socks are probably falling down, and he asked me to play catch. And it's like, I'll never forget that, because I thought, oh my God, this is Willie Mays. Sure, I'll play catch, And I remember him saying, don't worry, I don't throw that hard. Well, I never saw a ball rise so much just by playing catch. But that was a memory for me that definitely stands out. Obviously, in 2010 with the World Series is a big deal. And I've been lucky. We just threw Willie Mays' 90th birthday party on Friday night at the ballpark, and But the relationships I've had with, because I've been around so long, with Willie McCovey, who passed a few years ago. I don't know. I have so many memories that, of course, after we're done here, I'll be driving home thinking, I should have said that. But
That's a great one.
that to me is a big one, and for me, it's always all the old. I love the old timers games. I love bringing our players back. One thing that I'm very emotional about, and I'm very passionate about, is I think baseball brings us back to our childhood more than any other sport. I love bringing former players back. We have a Forever Giant program, and whether a player, in my day, it was more John Montefusco and Johnny LeMaster, those guys in those years. We didn't win back then, but those were my heroes because that's who I grew up with. And I think that's how fans feel about a lot of players. It's not always bringing the winning teams back; it's bringing all the guys back because everybody is somebody's hero. Everyone has a memory. So I do enjoy that. I love figuring out a way to do a ceremony where fans are literally crying in the stands. I want to move them. I want to bring back those memories for fans. That's a big deal to me. When we retired Barry Bonds' number, when I knew that Gagne that we asked him to come back and surprise Barry, and I said, don't tell anybody this. Let's keep it. We actually kept him. We brought him to the ballpark like 10 minutes before the ceremony, so nobody would see him. But to be able to surprise the crowd, and that wasn't so much a surprise Barry, surprise the crowd. That's putting a show on. And that's what those types of moments I love. I will say that the '89 World Series with the earthquake was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I'll end with the story on this here. Is that game? That day I remember like it was yesterday. It was, those of us who grew up in the city know that it's never warm. It was 90 degrees that day, and here we are playing the Oakland. We finally get to the World Series and we have to play the Oakland A's. We lose the first two games in Oakland, but we have this whole ceremony planned for our Game 3, which was our first home game. And right before the game started, I knew exactly where I was walking out through the center field fence, and we had a bunch of high school students holding this huge American flag and United States flag, and all of a sudden I heard this noise, and it was an earthquake, and they screamed, they dropped the flag. I remember they dropped the whole thing, and I remember the sound of those light towers, that clinkety-clanky feeling of those things swaying back and forth. And that was, but at the time, everybody started cheering. Like, man, we're down 2 games. This is a sign from God. This is what we need. But we realized then after a while, because I think my cell phone was the size of a shoebox. Back then, we just, nothing worked. And there was a fan up in the center, by home plate, and everybody was crowded around this person. They had a Sony Walkman, and that's when there was like a little tiny screen. And it was the first time you saw that there was damage on the Bay Bridge, right. And the word was spreading that this was a lot worse than we thought. So we never were going. The word finally spread that we're never going to play that game. But my story is, we had a big hospitality tent out in center field. We had a big party before the game. So a lot of us went out there afterwards because we had to clean things up and figure what we're going to do. And by the way, that's the night that probably Al Michaels became a news anchor more than a sports anchor because it was the biggest news story and the biggest sports story happened at the same place at the same time.
Right.
But later on that evening, I went back. Well, that evening, but a couple hours later, I went back in that tent and I saw Joe DiMaggio sitting there because he lived in the marina. And the marina's burning, and I remember, God, here's Joe DiMaggio sitting in his tent at the World Series. And it didn't matter if he's Joe DiMaggio or Joe Brown. Right. We were all the same. We were all affected by the earthquake, equally. And it just really stuck with me that, that it's going to affect Joe DiMaggio as much as it's going to affect the rest of us. And anyway, we all got through it. And it was. And when we finally did have, I think it was a week or two later, we started and we brought all the first responders back, and it was a great reopening. But I will, if I can add one last story on that. The next morning, we had and I was in my 20s, so I was a rookie at the time. But we were all invited to go to the St. Francis Hotel the next morning for a meeting as to what's going to happen. It was the Commissioner of Baseball, Faye Vincent, the Mayor, Art Agnos, the President of both American and National Leagues. Everybody was there, and the Giants owners, Bob Lurie, and so forth. And it was nice to be there, but I sure wasn't going to say anything. But I remember walking in that morning, glass all over Union Square, walking up the stairs from the lobby to St. Francis, and just candles. There was a meeting by candlelight, and I thought that was probably a moment I'll never forget, is being in that room. That's history being made, and I was lucky enough to be there. Thank God I didn't say anything, but I just listened. So anyway, a lot of memories over all those years.
Excellent. Last question here for you, Mario. So, why has SHC remained so special to you over the years?
Well, I think, like I said earlier, I think part of the experience here, and I'll say the same thing with St. Mary's College, I think a lot of it has to do with the Lasallian traditions. It's the Christian Brothers, and what they've instilled in people. The thing about the Christian Brothers that I've always admired is their style is to do the work, but not necessarily take all the credit. And I just always felt that about them. They do what they have to do. They teach just the core values of what's important when you're growing up. But they're not showmen, And it's real. It's God's work. But you feel it, and I felt it here, and I felt it at St. Mary's. But there's something about Sacred Heart. I mean, I loved coming to school. And the friends I made, they're still friends today. I mean, we act as though we were all here a month ago. But that's the feeling that I think that I felt here. So it was a special time. And I remember going to, we didn't have a gym like this, but our home court was over at Golden Gate Park. It was
Kezar Pavilion.
Kezar, yeah. And we walk in there, and it was so loud, and we had some good basketball teams back then too. And I was in the band, so we used to play. We used to bring the whole band out there, for those. It was crazy. It was so much fun. But there's so much of it I do remember. Just being in classrooms, talking with teachers, getting to know those. But it's a time of your life when you're starting to grow up. You're trying to figure it out. And the problem is you think you have all the answers, and you really don't. But the experience here helped us test a few things, helped us make a few mistakes, allowed us to do things on our own, and understand that you really can do anything if you put your mind to it. And so I loved it, and I'm still part of the Fighting Irish.
Well, Forever Irish. Mario Alioto.
So is it Forever Irish now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay,
Forever
sorry.
Irish. Well, Forever Irish, Mario Alioto, class of 1978. Thanks very much for taking the time to be with us.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.